I sat in the hospital parking lot, gripping my phone so tightly it felt like it would shatter. My whole body was tense, my breathing shallow, my pulse hammering in my ears. 30 missed calls, 17 texts, all from her, each one more frantic than the last. Where are you? The baby's coming. Hurry, please. I need you here now. My son was being born and I wasn't inside. I should have been. I should have been the first one to hold him, to kiss his tiny forehead, to whisper that I'd protect him for the rest of his life. That's what fathers do. But I already knew. Somewhere deep in my gut, I knew. I shoved the car door open and stormed inside, my footsteps echoing through the sterile white halls. A nurse at the front desk looked up, startled by my urgency. Before I could speak, she stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "You can't go in yet," she said, glancing at her chart. "Her husband is already with her." I blinked. The words didn't register at first. "Her what?" My voice came out hoarse. The nurse frowned. She said her husband was already inside. He arrived 10 minutes ago. A cold, sickening wave of understanding crashed over me. My fingers curled into fists, my legs moving before my mind could catch up. I pushed past the nurse, ignoring her protests, and yanked open the door to the delivery room. And there he was, standing next to my wife, holding my newborn son, my brother. His green eyes were wide with shock, but hers were something else entirely. A flicker of panic, quickly masked by something colder. Calculation. She wasn't surprised I was here. She was irritated that I had walked in before she was ready. She parted her lips, voice soft, gentle, rehearsed. "We were going to tell you." I took a step closer. The baby's tiny face peeked out from the blanket in my brother's arms. Green eyes, the same shade as his, not mine. I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound that felt like shattered glass in my throat. "Tell me what?" I asked, my voice low, steady. She hesitated. The act faltered. "We'll tell him about his real dad when he's older," she finally murmured, placing a hand on my brother's arm, as if that was the natural thing to do. "For now, we'll raise him with John's money." I could hear the heart monitor beeping, the distant murmur of nurses outside, the faint cries of another newborn in a nearby room. But all of it faded into static. They had planned this. Behind my back, they had built a life together, stolen mine, twisted it into something unrecognizable. And they had the audacity, the absolute gall, to think I would pay for it. I smiled. It wasn't kind. "Check your phones," I said, voice smooth, calm. "Your little secret? Viral. Your careers? Over. And your kid?" I took a slow step back toward the door. "Not my problem." Her mouth dropped open. My brother stiffened. And then the notifications started. The sharp chime of alerts. The frantic grabbing of devices. The widening of eyes as the weight of what I had done crashed over them. Their betrayal wasn't just a wound anymore. It was a reckoning. The first scream didn't come from the baby. Came from her. A shrill, panicked, feral sound. I had never heard her make a noise like that before. Not in anger, not in pain, not even in the throes of fake love when she used to moan my name like it meant something. No, this was true fear, true desperation. She scrambled for her phone, fingers shaking as she swiped at the screen. My brother, no, her real husband, was a step behind, fumbling in his pocket. The second his eyes met whatever I had sent him, his whole face drained of color. "No, no, no," she choked out, her voice breaking as she hit refresh. This can't be happening." I stepped back into the doorway, watching the fallout unfold. "Oh, it's happening." She looked up at me then, and for the first time I saw it. The real her. Not the loving wife. Not the mother. Not the innocent victim of complicated feelings. I saw the liar. The schemer. The woman who had played me for a fool, hollowed out my life, stolen my trust, and thought she'd get away with it. Her lips curled back in a snarl, but before she could spit out whatever pathetic excuse was burning on her tongue, my brother made a mistake. He tried to fix it. "Look, we can talk about this," he started, stepping toward me like we were still family. Like I was supposed to negotiate. "I swear, it's not what you think," I laughed in his face. "You're holding my kid, John." My voice was lethal. "Or sorry. Your kid." "So yeah, it's exactly what I think." His throat bobbed as he swallowed. He wasn't stupid. He knew this wasn't something words could fix. But that didn't stop him from trying. "We didn't mean for this to happen." I raised a brow. "Oh? You didn't mean to take her to hotel rooms while I was at work? You didn't mean to knock up my wife and plan a whole life with her while I was paying for it?" I took a step forward. "What exactly wasn't intentional, John?" He flinched. And that was when I knew I had one. My wife, his wife, was still tapping furiously at her phone, eyes darting over the screen like she could somehow undo what had already been done. Too late. By now, everyone had seen it. Her colleagues. His business partners. Their families. Their friends. A carefully packaged gift of texts, photos, call logs, everything I had been collecting for the last 3 months. Screenshots of hotel receipts. A folder of messages where she detailed exactly how much she resented me, how I was useful but boring, how she was only keeping me around until she had squeezed every last cent from me. One particularly vile confession where she admitted she hoped I wouldn't question the baby's paternity so she could milk me for child support. And, of course, the voice memo. A single, damning recording of her giggling to my brother about how easy it was to manipulate me. How pathetic I was. How stupid I had been. I had played it for myself a dozen times before today. But now the world was listening. She dropped the phone. Her body slumped back against the hospital bed, face frozen in horror as the notifications poured in. I could see it in her eyes. The moment she realized everything was gone. The reputation? Destroyed. Her career? Over. Her family's support? Evaporating by the second. She had spent years crafting the perfect image. A devoted wife. A hard-working professional. A woman everyone respected. And now she was just another cheater who got caught. My brother was still standing there, still holding the baby, his baby. But he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at her. Because he had just figured it out, too. This wasn't about love. It had never been. She had played him, too. The way his grip on the baby shifted, the way his jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck tensed, I knew exactly what was happening in his head. Regret. She had burned me to the ground to build a life with him. And now he was realizing that she'd do the same to him the second it suited her. I should have left then. I should have walked out with my final words and never looked back. But there was one last thing I needed to say. I turned my gaze to the tiny newborn in his arms, the baby I had almost called my son. The baby I had prepared a whole life for. For a second, I felt something sharp in my chest. A cruel twist of pain for the child who would never know the father he had been meant for. Then I reminded myself he was never mine to begin with. I exhaled, took a step back toward the door, and gave them both a slow, satisfied smirk. "Good luck," I said, letting the words sink in. Then I walked out, leaving them in the ruins of everything they had built. I didn't stop walking until I reached the elevator. My hands were steady, my breathing even, but inside, something was cracking. Something deep, something that had held me together for years. The betrayal hadn't just been a moment. It had been a lifetime in the making. Because now, standing in this cold, lifeless hallway, I realized the truth. She had never loved me. Not once. Not in the way I had loved her. Not in the way I had devoted every part of myself to the idea of us. To our life. To the family I thought we were building. The elevator doors slid open. I stepped inside, pressed the button for the ground floor, and as the doors closed, a bitter laugh ripped out of me. They were still up there, still unraveling. Still realizing that this wasn't just some private disaster they could sweep under the rug. This was public now. Because, for once, I had been one step ahead of them. It had started months ago, when the first whispers of doubt had crept into my mind. At first, I ignored them. Of course I ignored them. That's what you do when you trust someone. You don't look for reasons to doubt them. You don't search for the cracks. But then the signs started stacking up. The late nights. The sudden obsession with keeping her phone locked. The way she stopped looking at me when she spoke. And then the final clue, the pregnancy. I had been thrilled. I had been ready. But something in her face, something in the way she didn't meet my eyes when she told me made my stomach twist. So I did what I had never done before. I watched. I waited. And eventually the truth came to me in the form of a single, gut-wrenching realization. She wasn't hiding something. She was preparing something. A life without me. So I started preparing too. The private investigator had been easy to hire. The man was efficient, thorough. Within 2 weeks, I had enough evidence to destroy them both. But I wasn't ready yet. Not until the baby came. Not until I knew without a doubt that he wasn't mine. And now? Now I had everything. The proof. The betrayal. The ruin. And I had left them in it. The elevator doors opened and I stepped into the lobby where people moved around me like nothing had happened. Like my entire world hadn't just imploded. And then my phone rang. I looked down. Her name. I let it ring. I let it go to voicemail. Then I walked through the hospital doors out into the night and let the cold air burn away the last piece of her I had left. I didn't go home. Not because I was afraid to face an empty house. No, that was the only thing I wanted right now. Silence. A place where her voice didn't exist, where I could be alone with the weight of what I had just done. But I knew she'd be there. And not just her. Him. John. They had nowhere else to go now. Their perfect little fantasy world had shattered in their hands, and when people like them get exposed, they scramble. They don't sit in their mess and reflect, they look for damage control. And right now, I was their only lifeline. So instead of heading home, I drove. Aimlessly. No destination, no thought, just the hum of the engine and the city lights blurring past me. Until my phone rang. Again. Her name. For the first time in years, I hesitated. Before today, I would have answered immediately. No matter what. That's what a husband does, right? Picks up. Listens. Fixes. But now? Now I knew the truth. She didn't want to talk. She wanted to rewrite. To beg. To manipulate. To twist the narrative into something she could live with. I let it ring. Then, 2 seconds later, another call. John. I almost laughed. Instead, I pulled over, parked under the dim glow of a street lamp, and let them stew. My notifications were blowing up. The group chats. The social media posts. The voicemails stacking one after another. Some messages were from friends, if I could still call them that. The ones who had known. The ones who had probably whispered about it behind my back. Some were from people I hadn't spoken to in years. But the ones I cared about? The ones from my family? They weren't messages. They were missed calls. Because they didn't need to ask. They already knew what had happened. And then a new notification. A private number. I stared at it. A strange, twisting feeling in my gut. Then, without thinking, I picked up. A deep, measured voice greeted me. Sir, this is Detective Harris with the local precinct. We need to talk about your wife. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. Detective? My wife? My brain wasn't keeping up. I had spent months preparing for this fallout, orchestrating it down to the very last detail. Every move had been calculated, every piece placed exactly where it needed to be. I had expected her to cry. To beg. To curse my name. But police involvement? That was new. I shifted in my seat, fingers tightening around the phone. What about her? A pause. A careful pause. Are you in a safe location, sir? That made my pulse spike. Why wouldn't I be? We prefer to discuss this in person. His tone was flat, but there was an edge to it. A quiet kind of weight that made my stomach tighten. Are you able to come down to the station? I should have said no. I should have demanded answers, asked why a man who had just exposed his cheating wife was suddenly being asked to show up at a police station. But something told me that if I did that, I'd be spending the rest of the night wondering what the hell was going on. Yeah, I said, exhaling. I'll be there in 20. The police station was quieter than I expected. It was late, past midnight, and the air inside felt stale. Artificial. Too clean, like a place where real things weren't supposed to happen. Detective Harris was waiting for me near the front desk. Tall, Broad. The kind of man whose presence filled a room without trying. His dark suit was crisp, professional, but the tired look in his eyes told me he had been here for hours. He gestured for me to follow him. This way. I walked behind him, my mind racing. What the hell was this? What had she done? Or what was she trying to do to me? We stepped into a small, windowless room. Just a table. 2 chairs. A standard interrogation setup. That was when I realized I wasn't here as a witness. I was here as a suspect. Harris sat down across from me, sliding a folder onto the table. He didn't open it. Didn't even look at it. Just folded his hands and met my gaze. We received a call from your wife an hour ago, he said. She claims you're harassing her. That you release private information in a way that directly threatens her safety and well-being. I stared at him. Then I laughed. A short, sharp sound that ripped out of my throat. Are you serious? Harris didn't blink. Dead serious. I shook my head, leaning back. She cheated on me. She had a baby with my brother and let me believe it was mine. I exposed the truth. That's not harassment, that's justice. He exhaled through his nose, tilting his head slightly. And you have proof that what you posted is the truth? That made me go still. I did have proof. A whole mountain of it. But something about the way he asked the question made my mind slow down. Like there was a trap waiting for me to step into. Yes, I said carefully. Why? Harris tapped a finger against the folder. Because your wife is claiming the texts, the voice recordings, and the evidence you posted were fabricated. My blood ran cold. She's lying, I said, my voice sharp. Maybe. Harris studied me. Or maybe this isn't as clear-cut as you think. I clenched my jaw. Do you have any idea what she's done? What they both did? Oh, I do, he said. And let me be clear, I'm not a fan of cheaters. His tone was calm, almost conversational. But I'm also not a fan of public humiliation cases that escalate into something worse. I narrowed my eyes. Worse? He leaned forward slightly. Your wife says she's receiving threats. That people online are doxing her, sending her death threats, digging into her past. She claims she doesn't feel safe. And right now, her lawyer is preparing to file for a restraining order against you. My stomach dropped. Restraining order. That meant control. That meant legal power over what I could and couldn't do. It meant she was trying to turn the tables. I exhaled slowly, dragging a hand over my jaw. Let me guess, she's saying I did this out of spite. Harris shrugged. She says you wanted revenge. I scoffed. And? And that puts you in a very bad position. Silence. A heavy, dangerous silence. I had thought this was over. That I had won. That I had burned down their perfect little world and walked away clean. But I should have known. She wasn't done yet. I sat in that interrogation room, staring at Detective Harris, trying to wrap my head around what was happening. A restraining order? Against me? She wasn't just trying to save face. She was trying to flip the entire situation on its head. I leaned forward, my fingers pressing into the cold metal of the table. Let me get this straight. My wife cheats on me, lies to me, manipulates me into thinking her baby is mine. I exposed the truth, and now I'm the bad guy. Harris didn't react. He just watched me, like he was waiting for something. When I didn't say anything else, he finally sighed and sat back in his chair. That depends, he said. I frowned. On what? On how much of this was planned. That made my blood run cold. Planned. Like premeditated. Like they were trying to turn this into something criminal. I forced myself to stay calm. I collected evidence, detective. I didn't fabricate anything. I didn't stalk her. I didn't hack into her phone. I got what I needed the legal way. Harris studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. That's good, he said. Because I'll be honest with you, your wife? She's desperate. And desperate people do dangerous things. I swallowed hard. He wasn't telling me anything I didn't already know. She was cornered. Exposed. She had lost everything. And people like her? They don't just accept that. They fight. They lie. They rebuild the story in a way that benefits them. She already has a lawyer, Harris continued. She's pushing for harassment, defamation, even emotional distress. And John? He's backing her up. Of course he was. That spineless coward. So what happens now? I asked. Harris shrugged. That depends on how hard she pushes. If she goes through with the restraining order, things could get messy for you. It might affect your job, your reputation. She could spin this into something much worse than just a cheating scandal. I exhaled slowly. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, the slow realization that I was about to be dragged into another battle, one I hadn't prepared for. And the worst part? I should have seen this coming. I thought I had destroyed her. Thought I had left her with nothing. But people like her? They don't need love to survive. They need control. And she was already clawing for it. Harris stood, picking up the folder and tucking it under his arm. My advice? Get a lawyer. Now. Someone who knows how to handle this kind of case. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just sat there as the truth settled over me like a heavy weight. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. I left the station feeling like I had stepped into some kind of twisted alternate reality, one where the villain gets to rewrite history while the person they destroyed gets put on trial. The night air was sharp against my skin as I walked to my car. The streets were nearly empty, quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. I should have felt some kind of relief. At least I wasn't in handcuffs, at least I wasn't being charged with anything yet, but I knew better than to feel safe. She wasn't finished. Not even close. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, trying to figure out what to do next. Harris was right, I needed a lawyer. Someone who could cut through her lies before she turned this into something bigger. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts, looking for the number I never thought I'd need. And then a notification popped up. An email. From her. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. I should have ignored it. I should have deleted it without a second thought. But I opened it anyway. Subject, we need to talk. My teeth clenched. We. Like this was still something we were supposed to fix together. Like she hadn't already burned that bridge and danced in the ashes. I started reading. I know you're angry. I know you feel betrayed. But what you did tonight was cruel. I never meant to hurt you, and I never wanted things to end like this. You took something personal and made it public. And now I'm the one suffering for it. John and I are being harassed. People are sending us threats. My job is in jeopardy, and my parents won't even speak to me. You got your revenge. Congratulations. But if you think this is over, you're wrong. You can still fix this. You can tell everyone the truth, that you overreacted, that you let your emotions get the best of you. If you don't, I'll have no choice but to protect myself. And that includes legally. I don't want to go that route, but I will if I have to. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I stared at the screen, my pulse thudding in my ears. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even close. It was a threat. Not an outright one, no, she was too smart for that. But the message was clear. She wanted me to take the fall, to undo everything. To lie for her, and if I didn't, she'd make me pay for it. I exhaled slowly, rolling my shoulders back, forcing myself to think through the haze of anger clouding my brain. I had two choices. 1. Ignore her. Lawyer up. Fight whatever game she was trying to play. 2. Call her bluff. Meet her face to face. Get her to say what she really meant on record. I closed my eyes, weighing the risks. Then I opened them, went to my messages, and typed out 2 words. Where and when? Her response came within minutes. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. The cafe on Lexington. No hesitation. No questioning why I agreed so quickly. She was expecting me to fold. To sit across from her like a broken man and plead for my reputation, my future, my sanity. She didn't realize I wasn't coming to make peace. I was coming to end this. The next morning, I arrived 5 minutes early. The cafe was nearly empty, just a few early risers tapping away at laptops and sipping overpriced coffee. The scent of espresso clung to the air, but it did nothing to settle the tightness in my chest. I picked a table near the window, my back to the wall. Never let them box you in. She walked in at exactly 10:01. Not a second sooner. Not a second later. A performance. A carefully calculated entrance. And of course, she looked perfect. Not in the way she used to, when she'd throw on one of my hoodies and curl up on the couch, barefoot and laughing. No, this was the other her. The mask. The polished version. The one that convinced the world she was a victim instead of a snake. Her hair was smooth, not a strand out of place. She wore soft, neutral colors, deliberate, non-threatening. Understated makeup, just enough to make her look slightly tired, slightly distressed. Like she had been suffering. Like she was the one who had been wronged. I didn't stand when she approached. I didn't say anything at all. Just watched as she slid into the chair across from me, placing her designer purse carefully on the table like this was a business deal. For her, maybe it was. For me, this was war. She folded her hands, exhaling like this was hard for her. Like she wasn't the one who had ripped my life apart. Then she looked at me. Soft. Sympathetic. Fake. I didn't want to do this, she said. I leaned back. Do what? This. She gestured vaguely. The lawyers. The police. The public spectacle. She sighed, shaking her head. None of this had to happen. I tilted my head, staring at her like she was some rare, disgusting creature I had never seen before. Let me guess, I said. This is my fault. Her expression didn't change. You didn't have to go public. You didn't have to humiliate me. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No, I didn't. I let the words settle before adding, I wanted to. Her jaw tightened. For the first time, a crack. A small one, but there. She wasn't used to this version of me. The one who didn't bend. The one who didn't care if she cried. She inhaled slowly, like she was centering herself. Look, I know you're hurt. I laughed. You don't get to talk about my feelings. Her mouth snapped shut. And there it was, the shift. The second she realized she couldn't use pity to win this fight, she changed tactics. You need to fix this, she said, her voice sharp now. More controlled. This whole thing is out of control. People are talking. My job is in jeopardy. John's investors are pulling out of deals because they don't want to be associated with a scandal. We're getting death threats. Do you understand what you've done? I raised a brow. Oh, I understand exactly what I've done. She stared at me, realization flickering across her face. You wanted this. Of course I did. She blinked, like she hadn't allowed herself to believe it until now. Like she had convinced herself that I had posted everything in the heat of the moment, out of rage instead of something more dangerous. Intent. You're a bastard, she whispered. I shrugged. And you're a liar. Her nails tapped against the table, rapid and irritated. A small crack in the perfectly composed mask. Then she exhaled sharply, pushing back. Fine, she said. If that's how you want to play this, then let's be clear. I will not go down alone. If I lose everything, I will take you with me. I will make you the villain. I will paint you as an abusive, controlling husband who went nuclear when he found out his wife wanted to leave. I smiled. Slowly. Good. She blinked. What? I leaned in, just enough that she had to stop pretending to be unaffected. Because I have everything on you, I said, my voice low even. The texts, the receipts, the voice messages, the recordings. But more importantly, I tilted my head. I have your parents. That made her freeze. And just like that, I had her. She had spent years carefully curating the perfect image. And no matter how much she thought she was prepared to be a villain in my story, there was one thing she had never been prepared for. Being a villain in theirs. Her parents. The people who still thought she was their little girl. Who had called me after everything went public, horrified, apologizing for what she had done. They weren't on her side. They were on mine. And now she knew it. You're bluffing, she said, but her voice wasn't steady anymore. I sat back, pulled out my phone, and tapped my screen once before turning it to face her. A text thread. From her mother. We need to talk. I can't believe you would do this. Your father is ashamed of you. We are ashamed of you. I watched her read it. Watched her shoulders tense. You always thought you were the smartest person in the room, I murmured, sliding my phone back into my pocket. But this time? You played yourself. Her breathing was uneven now. She looked down, blinking rapidly like she was calculating. Not remorseful. Not guilty. Just figuring out how to pivot. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. I stood, grabbing my keys off the table. I don't think I will. Then I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there. For the first time since this whole thing started. Speechless, I walked out of that cafe with victory sitting heavy on my shoulders. But it didn't feel the way I thought it would. I had expected satisfaction. Some deep, burning sense of justice, of balance being restored to the universe. After all, she had earned every ounce of this destruction. She had built this moment for herself, lie by lie, betrayal by betrayal. And yet, as I stepped outside, feeling the cool air hit my face, I didn't feel free. Not yet, because I knew she wasn't finished. She had lost a battle, a big one. But war? War wasn't just about one decisive strike. War was about what happened after. How your enemy crawled out of the wreckage. How they reloaded. I climbed into my car, resting my hands on the wheel, and forced myself to think 3 steps ahead, just like she would. What was her next move? She couldn't win anymore. That much was obvious. Her reputation was gone. Her parents had turned against her. The world had seen what she was. But people like her? They don't need to win to get what they want. They just need to make sure you don't win either. And that's exactly what she would do. I barely made it home before the next hit landed. The second I pulled into my driveway, my phone vibrated violently in my pocket. A call. Then another. I frowned, pulling it out. Unknown number. I let it ring. Let it go to voicemail. Then another call. And another. I sighed, finally answering. Who is this? A beat of silence. Then, Mr. Carter, this is Lisa Reynolds from the Daily Report. I was hoping to get a comment from you regarding the allegations your wife has made. I hung up. What the hell? Before I could even process that, another call. A different number. Then another. And another. My stomach twisted. I opened my messages and the notifications poured in. Headlines. Articles. Tweets. She had gone to the press. I scanned through the flood of messages, my eyes moving too fast, my heart hammering too hard, trying to keep up with the chaos she had unleashed. There it was. A carefully crafted interview. Exclusive. Betrayed and abandoned. One woman's story of a husband's public revenge. I opened the link and there it was, her final act of war. She had flipped the story. Twisted everything. To them, I wasn't the man who had been cheated on. I wasn't the victim of infidelity and deceit. I was the abuser. The jealous husband. The vindictive, dangerous man who had destroyed his wife's life out of spite. I was scared, she had told them. I didn't know what he was capable of. When he found out about John, I begged him to talk to me, to work through it. But instead, he exposed me to the world. He made sure I had nothing left. Lie after lie. He humiliated me. He turned people against me. I'm getting threats. My family won't speak to me. I have nowhere to go. And the worst one, I loved him, but I see now that he never loved me. Because if he had, he wouldn't have wanted to destroy me. I felt something inside me snap. Destroy you? Destroy you? I had given her everything. Every ounce of love and trust and loyalty. And this was what she did with it? She had spent years lying to me, using me, humiliating me behind my back. And the second she couldn't control me anymore, she made me the monster. I gripped my phone so tightly my knuckles ached. I could already see it happening. The narrative shift. The comments. The people who believed her. Because that's how the world works, isn't it? A woman cries. A man is blamed. No one cares about the truth. And she knew that. She knew exactly what she was doing. The problem? She still thought I was playing by the old rules. She still thought I was going to defend myself, to fight for my name, to play the good man who pleaded his innocence while she painted herself as the broken, betrayed wife. But I had already learned the most important lesson of all. People like her? They don't want justice. They want power. And she had just handed me the perfect excuse to take it all away. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. Instead, I sat in the dark, phone in hand, watching the wildfire she had started spread. The article had already been picked up by bigger outlets. My name was trending. The comment sections were filled with the usual mix of outrage and stupidity. What kind of man does this to his wife? He sounds abusive. Even if she cheated, that doesn't justify what he did. Men like this are dangerous. The world didn't care about the truth. It never does. It cares about the better story. And right now, she was telling a damn good one. For a moment, just a moment, I almost let the anger consume me. Almost let myself spiral into the injustice of it all. But then I remembered. I had already won. She didn't know it yet. She thought this was her big comeback, her masterstroke. The moment where she clawed her way out of the wreckage and made me the villain. But the thing about people like her, they never know when to quit. And that's always what gets them killed. Not literally, of course. I wasn't about to do anything illegal. That's her game, not mine. But reputations, careers, those can die just as easily. And hers? Hers was already on life support. Because while she had been talking to the press, running to journalists, crafting her sob story, I had been working. I had been quietly, carefully, methodically making sure that when she finally realized how badly she had miscalculated, it would be too late to stop it. So I did what I had been waiting to do all night. I made one phone call, and within hours, everything she built collapsed. By noon, her face was plastered everywhere. Not the carefully curated image she had put out for the world. Not the polished victim act she had perfected overnight. No, this was the truth. Because when you spend years lying, scheming, stabbing people in the back, you make enemies. And some of those enemies? They keep receipts. My lawyer had been sitting on a file the size of a textbook. The investigator I had hired? He had dug up more than just proof of her affair. There were other lies, other scandals, her real history. And when the first cracks in her public story appeared, the people who hated her saw their chance to pile on. One by one, they came forward. Ex-coworkers, former friends, people she had used and discarded. They exposed everything. Her fraud, her workplace affairs, the money she stole. The reporters who had defended her? Now they were scrambling to correct their stories, to backtrack, to distance themselves. The public turned on her so fast it was almost funny. And John? Oh, John was in hell. Because he had staked everything on her. His business partners were pulling out. His family had turned their backs on him. His career was tanking. And the best part? She was blaming him. Because that's who she is. That's who she's always been. She never takes responsibility. Never admits when she's wrong. She just finds the nearest person and makes them the problem. I didn't even have to lift a finger to finish them off. They did it to themselves. The last message I ever got from her came a week later. It was short, pathetic. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She wasn't worth the words. Instead, I deleted the message, blocked her number. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt free.